What's going on, Workforce? Brian here, and today we're diving into why healers are concerned over the changes that Shadowbringers is making to healers. And this is the community feedback. At this time, we've had over 540 comments posted on that video alone, and you guys have really engaged. And I wanted to take some of those comments and really kind of highlight them here, and then obviously respond to them as well. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive right in. So our first comment comes from Tifoy. They write, "Hey, yeah, I think people got the wrong picture about healer concerns. I didn't find anyone complaining about DPS as a main concern. It was really with the actions that are available and the tools that you have. Think about healing, and really any job, I would say, if you push the job to its max. That's what's fun for me in any content, normal, savage, etc. And at the moment, I'm pushing max DPS while keeping everybody alive. It requires good knowledge of the fights and hands down knowledge of your job. If it switches to HPS, heals per second, instead of DPS, damage per second, this very second, I don't think anybody would complain. But herein lies the catch. At the moment and in the past, nothing was designed around pushing heals per second. Every fight has a cooldown period and everything that can be healed with a minimum GCD used. So people are scared of getting bored to death. I am scared." And I think Tifoy actually really hits the nail on the head when talking about heals per second and damage per second. The fear of being bored, the fear of what does this really mean, unfortunately cannot be answered, because the thing that's going to judge all the actions and the adjustments is the content. The content being king in this case. So if the content in Shadowbringers is designed around the idea of heals per second for a healer's perspective rather than damage per second, then we could see that shift and it could end up being quite engaging for healers. But then what about all the previous content that has existed today? In fact, to date, I can only think of a handful of different content that had some varying healer checks that were associated with it. And obviously more of the checks seem to be on damage. Obviously you have tank busters, which is a tank check if you want to mitigate that. But there are these various quote unquote checks that are built into the encounters as a part of mechanics that really drive this forward. I agree with you. I agree on the concept that if everything kind of switched to heals per second, that in and of itself is interesting. And that was kind of the third point that I was making regarding kind of jerking players around, and where we saw, Bard go from, just a normal like range DPS to a bow mage, and then back to kind of a ranged DPS, having kind of, hopefully, if this is the direction and they do hit that target and they make it engaging and nobody's bored to death, that we don't see that change again dramatically in the future. I think it's the dramatic shifts. Now, personally, I don't see this as a dramatic shift, more of a, I guess, kind of shearing up the foundation. I know a lot of people wanted a fourth healer, and maybe this is why we're not getting it. I think maybe when they talk about what they want healers to be, shoring that up, getting that set, getting that locked down and kind of perfected before introducing a new healer, maybe that's the direction we have to go. But I think it's balanced around, obviously, the content. But on that note, Zoila follows this up and says, "The only fight I can remember being heal intensive was turn 1 of the coil at eye levels around 85, and those snakes hit like trucks." Yes, they did. The other one that kind of comes to mind was, Siren from the Pharaoh Cirrus, dungeon, in which there was a healing check there. Like if you didn't heal them up to max, then they could go and essentially be charmed. And so there are mechanics that do require healer's knowledge. And obviously in Suna, being able to remove various debuffs from players is kind of a, something that healers are managed. But again, I think it's going to be based off of content, because when you see the changes, when you look at the changes that they've made overall, that it's especially like a Scholar with the reduction of skills from a damaging perspective, and I still haven't fully even wrapped my mind around Scholar personally, having played it a little bit, but seeing that they only have 2 skills that are class based, everything else shifted to the job. Honestly, I bet they were like, how do we split these two, permanently? And then it was like, this is how much work it's going to be. Let's just go ahead and not do it. And by say split these two, I'm talking about Summoner and Scholar together. So another thing for another day with that whole how that all works out. But no, I think it'll be interesting to see, because that is exactly what I think, what Tifu is pointing at. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. But it's really kind of engaged around the content, because as we also then gear up, as healers then get stronger and better, Like, is it designed around HPS, you know, heals per second, and then all of a sudden you just outgear that, and then it's just like, well, you know, my heals per second is there, and then you just end up having a lot of downtime, or, you know, a lot of managing of the MP, and to be able to toss that out. Obviously, you know, playing solo, you can toss out damage. Obviously, playing with Trust, I was able to toss out damage as a white mage, but we're gonna have to wait and see. And my hope is my hope really, and like I said in the previous video, and it still is true today, my hope is that we get in the content, we get in the 8-man raids, we get into all of it, and it's like, yeah, like, healers be healing, like, just, and that is so engaging and so interesting that, you know, any kind of damage that you end up putting out is going to be something that's kind of that dot. You know, you can do it, you know, in certain situations, but the content is, you know, designed around it. And so it's going to be neat. I'm hoping that it kind of is that shift. I'm hoping that it does bring back those memories of the coil and of the healing, and hopefully it engages that type of person. There is a mindset, though. There is a mindset that we've had that's built up over the last couple of expansions, kind of an expectation, and those that might not even be aware they have that expectation. So when it comes down to it, what I'm actually more concerned about is that players have the expectation that healers are going to do damage. They're not, because they're going to have to focus in on the content, and then you end up having an adjustment period. I think that's probably the proper term that we'll go ahead and say with that. So Cat Claus writes, I've wiped way too many times because healers are focused on their parse. Good riddance. And here is where an idea kind of pops in my head. And here is where probably maybe the most controversial thought in this video is going to come from. And it's when we talk about heals per second versus damage per second, when we talk about the content designed around for it, what fundamentally, I guess, pushes us to that definition? What pushed us in the first place to damage per second? And it's the fact that we really parse that. We did. Like, people, you know, on computers, they have that ability. Don't talk about it in the game. It's not, you know, officially supported, but Square Enix really doesn't do anything about it. So it's kind of like, you know, don't talk about Fight Club. And if for those who don't know the reference, there's a movie called Fight Club. You're not supposed to talk about Fight Club. Anyway, moving on. We need some way of rewarding healers for healers per second. We need some way of understanding what that is. Like, the game needs itself. Like, this is me on my soapbox saying that I don't necessarily want it in real time, but the fact is that, like, when you look at the end of the content, if a healer is not being gold medaled, you know, like, for healing, for doing what is essentially what we say that we want them to do, then it doesn't matter. Then the human, like us, we're going to define the meta, and if the healer doesn't fit into that meta, we're going to use that meta to beat it over their head. Now, I hate metas in the sense, like, I've said this before, but I believe that the meta is here to serve us, we're not here to serve the meta. Unfortunately, not everybody subscribes to that philosophy, and with that concept, we need something to reward people for playing the way that it was designed. If you want somebody to focus in on heals per second, what does the game do to incentivize that? You know, like, if you if you want me to be, you know, like, to do some, like, give stuff away, like, if I wasn't inclined to do anything charitable, I am naturally, but the fact is that the government does give us tax breaks for our charity, and they do that because it's a good for the community. Same kind of concept, you know, with some degrees of stretching the analogy here in video games. If the developers want us to play a certain way, they should reward that style of play. Otherwise, we're going to define it. And at the end of the day, we value speed over anything else right now. And the way you get things done fast is you bring a lot of damage. And that's the current way the game is structured. Maybe Shadowbringers changes that. That's going to be really exciting to see. Hopefully that's the case. But if it doesn't, then there's a lot of work they're doing when almost in my mind, this isn't a one-size-fits-all, but almost in my mind, if at the end of the game you think Overwatch, you think, oh, you did more healing, etc. You healed, this was all this stuff, gold medal, silver medal, boom, 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 you broke a new record, you know, like, oh man, that's really cool. And then if there are rewards associated with that, that solves the problem, because then everybody is contributing to that role. It's a stretch. I'm not saying you can't copy and just placed in Overwatch's stat system into this, because there's a lot of nuance, because mine can rely on yours and we're all working together. But Games have solved this problem. Leaderboards have solved this problem. Stats can solve this problem. And, you know, when you talk about it, I don't see them changing their parse. So, to Cat Claus's point, like, if we're still only valuing the damage per second, I don't see how anything has changed. You've just, you know, kind of somewhat like, or trying to hold people back. But we're gonna find a way. Life finds a way. Damage finds a way. Anyway, thank you, Cat Claus, for the comment. Those are my thoughts on it as well. So Drunken Devil writes, I'm a white mage main, and I like running 4 to 8 man content, having people topped off and DPSing while managing mana. I find that playstyle fun. If they want us to DPS less, the fights better keep me busy healing, and my party raid keep me engaged. So, yeah, I agree. I really enjoy White Mage, and I'm wondering if it's going to draw me back. Like I said, I think and I hope that when you look at Scholar, Astrologian, and White Mage together, that they end up providing the variety when it comes to it. Maybe White Mages just have a better time healing. Maybe Astrologians with their utility have a better time at bringing damage to the party. Don't know really where Scholar lies, and so Scholar mains, which that's how I wrapped up Stormblood. Where does that lie? Where is that going to fit in overall to how it feels? There are some changes there that definitely have people concerned. We talked about the content. I think that's key, and I don't need to go and keep beating that drum regarding it all is going to rely on the content, because until the game launches, we really won't be able to tell. Now, E3 might change some of that because there will be the 8-man raid, but they usually tune those down a little bit to make it accessible for people who haven't played, because they are exposing the game to a wider audience at that time who might have stepped away. Who you don't want to come into this and be like super rusty and then just get destroyed, because that always works out really well for 14 and the mainstream video game media. But I sound like some theory, the mainstream media. Anyway, that's my thoughts there. Thanks, Drunken Devil. So finally, Carlos Hernandez follows us up and says, I feel that the backlash is due to the perceived culture shift in the community. You see, in Final Fantasy 14, we've really gotten used to having to deal damage during the downtime. We've gotten so used to this, in fact, that when the devs say that they're downplaying the DPS aspects, people start throwing tantrums about it. Personally, I don't mind this. That said, if you're going to be taking away pretty much the only thing that you could do in your downtime, then you better make sure, you better make up for it somehow. Make the healing hard. Make it something that actually is engaging to do, because the lack of engagement is what led to the DPS culture. I think it's... whether it's lack of engagement, whether it's kind of the fear from people not wanting to play the role, whether it's, I think it may be kind of a factor of all those things, right? Because essentially the game kind of starts out with one healer in Conjurer and then eventually opens up Scholar, like when you look at it 2.0 to 3.0 and beyond. I think a lot of some of the challenges the game faces is due to that. Like, they did the impossible, and, it came at a cost, and sometimes that cost, is paid out later into the game's life cycle. The cultural shift in the community, I think it's all, like, the reward is, in and of itself, it's about getting to it, right? Because there's not multiple paths, there's no, like, subset for rewards, like I said earlier with Cat Claws, like, hey, like, you did this, and we're going to reward you as such. But maybe Shadowbringers can change that. We see kind of the quest, the role quest system kind of coming out over the job quest system and things like that, or maybe those are going to be more in tandem, working together. And maybe that's where things are going to shift. Maybe we can start to see kind of that culture being formed around the tools needed, because, like, we can sit here and say that it was that because healing isn't hard, that a DPS culture formed, and I'm inclined to disagree with that, because, like, I think it's all about speed. It's like the faster you go, and because the game's content doesn't factor in healing damage as a part of the calculation, so if healers then damage, we go faster, we get rewarded faster, and then we go about and do other things, especially in our busier lives. I think it's not a DPS culture. I think it's just a shifting in the kind of the mindset and the culture, and it's almost the the fear of casualization, where accessibility kind of overtakes what makes games worth investing in. It's a bigger conversation for, like, maybe another video that we'll kind of touch on, but like, with this, I don't mind them downplaying the DPS mindset. I think if they focused healers on support and healing, with a little DPS, like that seems like it's going to be more interesting and engaging. But that's all based off the toolkit, shielding, buffing everybody's damage. And I think they have their work cut out for them. I think when you look at people who were expecting a 4th healer to kind of complement the tank, I think when you saw the 2 DPSs kind of come in with the last expansion, I honestly think, and do not envy them in trying to get healing to where it's supposed to be. And it's not just with the jobs, like we keep saying. The jobs and their actions are also then complemented by the content. And let's say they nail it in Shadowbringers and it's perfect. How does this then trickle? How does this then feel in older content? Do we see a lack of engagement there? That's my concern. I think people are right to be concerned. Like I said, and I'm going to keep saying it, don't let it ruin your day. Don't let it ruin it. Write down your thoughts. That's actually a real helpful thing sometimes, because it's if everything's stuck in your brain, sometimes it helps to write it down and then maybe kind of post it. And guys, be respectful of everybody's opinion in this regards. I think, especially until we can go hands-on, try not to freak out. Try to maintain a cool head. And engage and talk about it and be excited. I think one of the things that I don't want lost in any of these conversations is just how exciting Shadowbringers is and just how good it feels to play it, and how the world, feels to be engaged with it. It's really quite exciting. And I think that, I hope, and I'm rooting for them. They're obviously making changes all up to the last minute. So who knows what we'll see here at E3 in a couple days, but I'm sure it's going to be pretty exciting. And we'll be sure to talk about it here on the channel. Thank you, Carlos, Drunken Devil, Cat Claws, Zoila, and Tifoy for your comments. I really appreciate the engagement, and I hope you guys all have a fantastic day, both watching and obviously commenting below. Would love to know your thoughts, on this video in the comments below. Please feel free to let me know what you're thinking. Did any of these comments kind of sum up what you were either concerned about or not concerned about? What are your thoughts on DPS culture? What are your thoughts about parsers and things like that? Lots that we covered here. But anyway, guys, I'm going to wrap it up. For Work to Game, my name's Brian. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you have a phenomenal day, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care. What's that? Is it done?
The new necklace I made up.
That's beautiful.
You can have it.
Thank you. Can we tie it for you?
Sure.
All right, come deliver it to me after a while. Can we pick it up after work at your shop, okay?
You don't need to deliver it. I can deliver it to anybody else if you want.
Okay.
But I can give it to you.